Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cult Situation Report. I am Daniela, your friendly neighborhood scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. I wrote a book called Uncultured. It's about growing up in the Children of God religious cults, one of the more extreme cults in the world, and then going into the cult of the U.S. Army. Last time a cult leader was running America, I published that. This time, I have written a book called The Culting of America, which comes out January 20th, the one-year anniversary of us all living in this particular cult. It is available for pre-order. I recorded the audiobook last week, which is going to go out with all the hard copies. So if you know you want the audiobook, you can buy the hard copy and you're going to get the digital and the audio. If you know you don't want the hard copy, then buy the audio or the digital on its own. We're also sending out the audio and the digital before January, hopefully in 2025, before January 20th. All right. Every Friday in the military, every officer sends out the situation report. And as the intelligence officer, the expert on the bad guys, my report is all about what was going on with the bad guys. So this is my report of everything that happened in the week of cults and in my week of cults. Thanks for being here. Keith Raniere claims the feds planted evidence in Nxivm sex cult case. By the way, I just have to say that referring to stuff as the feds was a big thing in my cult, and I think in a lot of Christian evangelical cults, and every time I hear that term, I'm just like, culty. The conservatives say it a lot now, too. Keith Raniere, the imprisoned architect of Nxivm and its shadowy inner circle, DOS, is back in court claiming the FBI tampered with evidence to link him to child pornography and sexual exploitation. The 65-year-old former self-help guru argues that federal investigators falsified files on a computer hard drive, aiming to overturn his 120-year sentence for sex trafficking, forced labor, and wire fraud. For those of you who are new to this story, Nxivm had a sort of cult within a cult thing going on, with DOS, the secretive subgroup of Nxivm. DOS was sold to recruits as a female empowerment program, a sisterhood, but was in fact a labyrinth of control and coercion. And in almost all cults being patriarchal, we tend to see a very big attitude focus and appearance focus on proper ways to be a woman, proper ways to be a man. And Keith Raniere was no exception, even though he's about the least masculine thing you could throw a rock at. Like much of Nxivm, DOS resembled a pyramid scheme in both structure and operations. More on pyramids later in this SitRep, so stay tuned. Recruits were forced to serve as slaves to members in the level above them. All members except the newest recruits had both slaves and masters, those who they controlled and those who controlled them. One of the mechanisms of control was all new initiates were required to provide collateral, such as nude photos or personal secrets. This was then leveraged to blackmail them into compliance, lest the information be leaked. And I want to say here, people really love to say, it's not a cult. You're free to leave anytime. And cults don't try to force you to stay against your will. They try to force you to want to stay, right? As soon as you're done, the cult wants you gone so fast. If there's any way they can convince you to want to stay, like, hey, we have naked photos of you, they will often do that. Even though this organization was billed as all about sisterhood, an organization by women for women, to the surprise of nobody who has experience with cults, it was actually Keith himself at the top of the pyramid. Fun fact, Keith Raniere was banned by a judge from having anything to do with pyramid schemes or multi-level marketing before he went and built Nxivm, the most multi-level marketing cult of all time. At Keith Raniere's direction, some were even branded with his initials using a heated iron, painfully permanent proof of their submission. And we have read all about this in Scarred by Sarah Edmondson in Cult Book Club. More on that later, but good book. She also has a podcast called A Little Bit Culty. Check her out. Raniere's defense team now argues that key digital evidence was used at trial, including nude photos of a minor member, was manufactured or manipulated by prosecutors to inflame the jury. His lawyers claim the file's timestamps, metadata, and Folders were altered to paint a more damning picture, yet prosecutors insist all evidence was fully available during the trial and supported by the testimony of witnesses, including the victim's sister, who described the sexual abuse firsthand. It's actually not surprising to me that he's trying to open up a reinvestigation under this administration. Appeals judges pressed Raniere's team on the reliability of their claims, noting the alleged tampering would not have fundamentally changed the outcome, given the weight of testimony and other evidence. These aren't the only pieces of evidence. The jury had the full picture of his conduct, one judge remarked. The appeal also revisits the broader horror of Nxivm's operations. Young women coerced into sexual slavery, victims blackmailed into compliance, and a leader who positioned himself as both guru and predator. Even as Raniere alleges government misconduct, the court panel underscored the sheer breadth of his convictions, which include 11 racketeering acts spanning sexual exploitation, identity theft, and fraud. As the Second Circuit considers the appeal, the case remains a chilling reminder of how a self-help empire masked a meticulously organized system of abuse. For the public, Nxivm is no longer just a story about manipulation and charismatic leadership. It's a case study in modern cult brutality, where power, secrecy, and exploitation intersect with devastating consequences. And on this note of self-help, something I say often is anywhere in the space of personal transformation, predators will show up. There's nothing you can do about that to mitigate that or to neutralize that. You just have to be more careful. If you are going into a space of personal transformation, whether that is exercise, whether that is education, whether that is self-help, whether that is dieting, whether that is getting married, there can be predators. For cult scholars like me, Nxivm is a good case study that can be used to debunk the idea that all cults are religious. And in fact, part of why I think it got so far is because it wasn't religious. And in America, we have this stereotype of cults are religious. Nxivm and DOS were self-help / personal growth / empowerment groups. It's not just religion. Personal development spaces of all kinds, right? It's interesting to note also that the Nxivm story is one of the few instances where a cult leader was held accountable for his terrible behavior and some of the survivors saw justice. It's not surprising that he's appealing the conviction, but we hope that Raniere continues his groundbreaking work as his new role as a prisoner. We watch this rare instance of a cult leader who fucked around and found out with interest and hope it sets a precedent for similar consequences for similar offenders in the future. It's also a good example of how when a government or legal system takes out a cult leader, that doesn't necessarily end it. Warren Jeffs is another good example, still running the FLDS from jail. Keith Raniere still has devoted followers, even though all of this stuff is known about him and he has a 120-year sentence. So really, really generally the only way a cult leader is taken out to the followers is with big, beautiful burials. Toddler's death and 2 missing adults spotlight Inland Empire cult. Authorities are probing a disturbing string of incidents connected to His Way spirit-led assemblies, a religious group in California's Inland Empire, after new leads have tied the death of a 4-year-old nearly 15 years ago to 2 recent disappearances. In 2010, paramedics found Timothy Thomas unresponsive in Colton just before he died of septic shock from a ruptured appendage while in the temporary custody of the group's leaders, Shelley Bailey, Kat Martin, 62, and Daryl Music Martin, 57. The couple, who styled themselves as the prophetess and head pastor of the church, were briefly detained last month after police recovered illegal weapons during a search, though both have since been released. Nearly a decade later, Ruben Moreno, 43, vanished, followed in May 2023 by Emilio Ganem, 40. Both men had ties to the religious group, which police describe as cult-like, and investigations into their disappearance remain active. Law enforcement has made several arrests in the ongoing probe, but the whereabouts of Moreno and Ganem are still unknown. This is also to the time to say when we have deaths by medical neglect in cults, cults hate medical care, and so this often happens. I have a brother that I never met because he died when he was 2 from walking pneumonia in a cult. Police are urging anyone with information on the missing people to come forward, and while detectives continue to review new leads surrounding Timothy Thomas's death, anyone who knows anything about that is encouraged to come forward as well. If one of you watching has a tip, you can call it in anonymously to the We Tip hotline at 1-800-78-CRIME. The recent disappearances combined with the past tragedy draws attention to a potentially broader pattern of abuse and control. The case casts a chilling light on a congregation where devotion may have deadly consequences. Australia faces rising cult crisis as inquiry exposes hidden high control groups. Australia is confronting what experts are calling a modern cults crisis, as a Victorian parliamentary inquiry reveals a sharp rise in coercive high control groups, promising simple answers to complex problems. This also tells me that Australia is probably going through times of social turmoil, because that's when we see cults pop up. Psychologist Raphael Aron, who has worked with cult survivors for decades, told lawmakers that cult involvement is now more widespread and more hidden than ever before. The hearings have heard chilling stories of abuse, manipulation, and spiritual coercion, including the 2022 death of 8-year-old Elizabeth Struz, a diabetic girl whose parents and members of a religious sect known as the Saints denied her insulin. 14 members of the group were convicted of manslaughter earlier this year. Experts say the new generation of cults often disguise themselves as legitimate churches, wellness movements, or personal development groups. Cults very often have fronts that look legitimate. They don't look so culty anymore, Aaron said. Groups like the South Korean-based Shincheonji Church have reportedly been recruiting aggressively on Australian university campuses, targeting international students seeking community. A government survey of more than 300 survivors found 95% suffered psychological harm. Over half faced physical abuse or financial control, and a third experienced violence or sexual assault. Survivors also spoke of evangelical and Pentecostal environments where spiritual obedience masked emotional and sexual exploitation. The inquiry has reignited debate over how to define a cult versus a legitimate religion, and whether new laws criminalizing coercive control could unintentionally target mainstream faith practices. And by the way, in the US, we had a whole thing called the Cult Wars, because in the 80s, Americans wanted laws against coercive control, and religious leaders said, that's gonna impact our coercive control. We don't like that. And so they got a whole bunch of academics of religious studies who should not be fucking talking about cults to talk about cults. And in fact, the man, Gordon Melton, who came up with the term new religious movements, took $100,000 from the Children of God to say that they were not a cult, which resulted in 4 countries, including Australia, giving the children back to the pedophile cult. Some witnesses urged a consumer law model requiring religious or spiritual groups to publicly disclose their beliefs and expectations of members. As one survivor puts it, nobody joins a cult. You join a community that turns out to be something else. The inquiry continues through 2026, but experts warn the problem is already deeply entrenched and growing quieter, smarter, and more dangerous. The inquiry will report to Parliament in September 2026 and is expected to continue public hearings until then. We are going to keep an eye on the story because it's always interesting to see how governments handle these issues. And on the note of nobody joins a cult, let's read my quote on that, which is a very, very often quoted part of this book. None of it is easy to spot. These tactics that cult leaders and many other kinds of leaders rely upon to gain loyalty and inspire their followers. None of it happens all at once, and all of it is genuine. People don't join cults. They join churches, organizations, communities, and groups they think will solve a problem for the world or within themselves. They follow leaders. The more charismatic, the better. Maybe they're driven by hope, or maybe it's fear. Maybe it's a combination of the two, strengthened by the fuel of righteousness, and often resentment. And then the logic breaks down, but we're too tightly enthralled to these cults among us to notice. The first rule of cults is we are never in a cult. It's always them, not us. There's always someone else to blame. The others, the outsiders, the unchosen. And as belief builds in its followers, the less likely we are to question. The easier it is to hate, harm, even kill, because we are the good guys. We are right, no matter how many signs point in a different direction, or how that direction shifts with the course of the wind. And here when I say when the logic breaks down, but we're too tightly enthralled to these cults among us to notice, I love that. I love having two books, because then you can do cute little references to stuff you've already said before. This is from the end of Culting of America. It's the chapter Ends Justifies the Means. Real change will take collective courage. It will take communities willing to name what isn't working, to question what we've accepted for too long, and to build something better in its place. Individual action, while valuable, is not enough to confront the scale of today's systemic problems. Whether we're talking about inequality, polarization, or global environmental collapse, meaningful change requires collective solutions by communities that are connected, informed, and working together. Community, not individualism, is our best hope for addressing systems that no longer serve us, especially now as the logic of those systems is breaking down. Of course, get copies of Culting of America linked here. John Bolton indicted over mishandling classified notes from the Trump era. Oh, I love this for me. Former Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton has been hit with an 18-count federal indictment in Maryland. Yeah, my state. Accused of transmitting and retaining highly classified information under the Espionage Act. The charges center on diary entries and notes Bolton kept during his time in the White House, some of which he shared with two unnamed individuals via personal email and messaging accounts. Bolton, who became a vocal critic of Trump, reportedly compiled the notes as part of the research for his memoir, The Room Where It Happened. Prosecutors allege that the documents contained sensitive national defense information and were improperly shared with people lacking security clearances. The indictment notes that Bolton left the messaging group shortly after leaving the White House, taking more than 1,000 pages of classified material with him. Bolton's lawyer insists the notes were personal diaries, often unclassified and shared only with family. Why often? Unclassified. They need to be always unclassified. And that no wrongdoing occurred. Bolton himself called the charges politically motivated, promising to defend his lawful conduct. The case emerges amid heightened scrutiny of former Trump officials and critics following FBI searches of Bolton's home and office in 2025, and broader concerns over the handling of sensitive information by former government officials. Former President Trump, when asked about the charges, labeled Bolton a bad guy, but did not provide further comment. Oh, when he was former president. The indictment highlights the ongoing tension between accountability for mishandling classified material and the historical practice of public officials keeping personal records of their work, while also intersecting with political controversies surrounding the Trump administration. In other words, we are seeing Trump go after everyone and anyone who he dislikes or who was insufficiently loyal or who otherwise threatens his teeny tiny ego. It's also kind of funny in a sad way to see this hoopla about messaging and security after Hexit's Signalgate fiasco. Group chatting active war plans is a bad idea. Also, Trump is being looked at for improper usage of materials that might get him as well. I, first of all, was the intelligence officer in the military. That's the person in charge of the secrets for the unit. Very, very serious, very, very big deal. That doesn't mean that this is not Trump going after him. This just means that John Bolton probably did some bad guy stuff when he was working for a bad guy. And now, unfortunately for him, that bad guy wants to go after him. Kind of funny when this happens. And now for the cult of MAGA. Well, I guess there's nothing to report here because the government is shut down, right? Ho-hum, nothing interesting. Just kidding, obviously. Trump has been on a roll this week, shitting all over America by tearing down the East Wing of the White House so he can build his tacky ballroom, and by releasing an incredibly juvenile AI video of himself as a pilot king dropping poop all over American citizens participating in the No Kings protest, while Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone plays in the background. This was a truly absurd piece of propaganda, and it's embarrassing to think about what other countries think about it. Loggins apparently has too much sense to want to be affiliated with such anti-American tackiness. On Monday, he sent a statement to NPR saying, "This is an unauthorized use of my performance of Danger Zone. Nobody asked me for my permission, which I would have denied, and I request that my recording on this video is removed immediately." While we're talking about no kings, let's get into the protests a little bit more. Estimates say about 7 million people showed up to protest on Saturday, but I think a lot of estimates are saying it was probably closer to 10 million. The protests were overwhelmingly peaceful affairs, despite the GOP's predictions that they would be some kind of costumed riots. That being said, there's been a lot of interesting discourse around the value of no kings or of any protest in general. What is a good protest? Well, we here at Knitting Cult headquarters think a protest is what you make of it. You can go to hang, or you can go to connect to like-minded people and see how you can find ways to collaborate and support each other. You can go to meet local organizers who are there to spread their messages and engage more people in the work that they are doing. Election day is right around the corner, and protests like No Kings are great tools to use to get out the vote. And this week I recorded a podcast with Amanda Nelson, Amanda's Mild Takes. That'll be coming out next week. But we talked about this, and she talks about how, like, protests are important. And some people criticizing, saying it was just a bunch of middle-aged white ladies and normies out there. That's important. Because there's one thing about middle-aged white ladies. Well, there's three things about middle-aged white ladies in America. We vote. We tend to have disposable income. Oh, and there's a fuck ton of us. So part of being out there at the No Kings protest on Saturday for me, other than meeting a bunch of you, was showing the Republicans how many of us are pissed. And gosh, who was it? Some comedian, I think it was Jon Stewart, who was doing like, Fox is complaining about angry white people. Like, even white people are angry. What's going on? Like, it's important to show that. I think is really important that white people got outside and got angry and black people stayed inside, and that kept everybody safe. But also, to echo what I told you all before the No Kings protest, it was an important thing to show ourselves. Because when 10 million Americans roll out of their homes simultaneously and hit the streets, there's not a goddamn thing Donald Trump and his shrivelly little ICE Stapo or even the whole military can do about it. We, the people, have the numbers. Okay. We said elections are just around the corner. I know some of you are thinking, but Daniela, it's 2025. Midterms are not till next year. If we even have midterms, because Trump's going to cancel elections. Good news. There are local elections happening right now in many states. We don't need to be hanging out in the future of is he going to cancel elections. There are elections right now. And this is across the board. Like, if you are worried about something, go get involved in that thing. If you're worried about food stamps, go get involved in food kitchens. If you're worried about ICE, go get involved in your neighborhood and figure out how you're going to hide people and you're going to Karen away the ICE. If you're worried about national elections, go get involved. Yeah. If you're worried about the military, go educate yourself on it. If you're worried about drones, go educate yourself on how easy it is to take out drones. Just like, go educate yourself on your government and your country and then get involved with the things you're concerned about. Because that's the answer. Why we are where we are in America is because white America has absolutely advocated any kind of civic responsibility or involvement because our lives were just fine. A few minutes ago, I talked about pyramid schemes in relation to Nxivm. Now let's revisit them for a minute. Pyramid schemes only work when the strong, hard workers at the bottom do enough labor to support the smaller level that sits on top of them. The pattern repeats all the way up to the smallest layer in the pyramid at the top. If we think of U.S. government as a pyramid, which is not an exact metaphor, but work with me here, the president is at the top of the pyramid. Your local governments and political organizations make up the bigger layers that support the structure. We cannot expect the layers at the top, the House, the Senate, the presidency, to be strong if the foundation upon which they are built is not capable of supporting them. Sort of a mess up there right now. At some point, the bottom of the pyramid stopped being strong enough to support and push back effectively on the dysfunction at the top. So now our government is closed. But also, there is no point at which the top of the pyramid doesn't need the bottom. There is no point at which the dictator doesn't need the dictated. There is no point at which the cult leader doesn't need the cult members. And so we hear this language from a lot of you, like, they're already in power, they don't need us anymore. That is literally not true. One of the biggest differences about America and any other country is we have a shit ton of people. We're loud, colorful assholes who don't like to do what we're told. And we have 500 million guns. At any point, we can turn on our government. There is no point at which it is too late. The only thing is how many people are going to die in pushing back. The faster we do it, the less people are going to die. Okay, there are local elections happening all over the country in November. Please go educate yourself on it. In California, there's a ballot initiative, Prop 50, that's really important response to attempts by other states like Texas to make changes in voting districts that would ultimately create more power strongholds for Republicans. If passed, Prop 50 could counter some of those impacts. If you are a California voter, the KCL team thinks voting yes is the right choice. Also, we encourage anyone who's interested in phone banking in support of Prop 50 to check out the Wellness Therapist's Instagram. She's been posting on how to get involved. Or check out sister districts' websites for info on campaigns they're involved with. Or Google Elections 2025 and your zip code to see what's on the ballot in your area. From school boards to city council ballot initiatives, we need to show up for our democracy for every election. The more we participate in our democracy, the harder it will be for them to take it away from us. And this is kind of poignant because I, as you know, as part of my job, y'all, I talk to all kinds of people and all kinds of experts in what's going on right now. And everybody is saying the same thing. And it's the only advice that anyone has for what to do right now. Get involved in your local community. Get involved in your local government. We did a podcast on cults and the culting of America with a brother-sister film team who made a film called Join or Die. And one of their very sobering statistics was 40% of Americans say they are not in a group of any kind, right? The other thing is, nobody knows what to do, right? This is our first American dictatorship for everybody. Like, we are all figuring it out. So you have to figure out what you have to do. You have to figure out what you are willing to sacrifice. I made a video talking about some of the things that I'm doing it's on my TikTok, my Instagram, and my YouTube. People have then put a bunch of stuff that they're doing. I'm going to repeat that here. So this is what the Knitting Cult household is doing. Mr. Knitting Cult Lady goes to the PTA meetings every month. Knitting Cult Lady has built platforms of 500,000 people to educate on things that are going on right now, and has also written 2 books that are relevant to what is going on right now. Additionally, I am organizing a giant, hopefully national level, Angry Knit-In DC and the National Mall on March 8th, International Women's Day. We're going to have our first planning meeting on Monday. We are going to probably be raising funds to bus people in from all over, but also to have satellite events. I really hope a bunch of you will get involved. I literally said to myself, I can do 30 minutes to an hour a day of organizing to try and save my country. Also, Mr. Knitting Cult Lady and I are organizing in our neighborhood a couple of things. One of them is just getting together a happy hour to literally talk about what we are going to do if ICE shows up to our neighborhoods. And one of the things that we are going to do is call Mr. and Mrs. Knitting Cult Lady, who are white as fuck veterans with 27 years of military experience and money to help people pay for lawyers. And if I get called, I'm going to put on my best Karen and go out there and fuck with ICE. If you are a middle-aged white lady, start fucking with ICE. Also, start pulling over on the road when you see a cop with a black person pulled over. Just pull over and stand witness. These are things you can do. But my plan is to get in ICE's face and be like, do you know that you can be arrested for this now? Do you know that you personally can be sued as well as your organization? Do you know that that mask over your face is what's going to send you to the death chamber in Nuremberg trials? And do you know that The Hague can still come after you for war crimes, even if Donald Trump pardons you? Also, do you know that my lawyer is going to be with these people every step of the way? And white people, I don't fucking care if you have lawyers. Throw your imaginary, hypothetical lawyers at ICE. We are helping one of Mr. Knitting Cult Lady's fellow graduate student who is marrying an immigrant pay for immigration lawyer. We are looking for an immigration lawyer. If you are willing to do it especially at a discounted fee, we would very much appreciate that. Feel free to reach out to admin@uncultureyourself.com. But basically, we're going to try to use our network to find an immigration lawyer who can help for free, or we are going to use our resources to pay. I have started a ladies dance group, and we are getting together for the first night tonight. It is only me and 2 other ladies, and the point isn't actually dance. The point is to get together on a bi-weekly basis every other week and know stuff about each other's lives and actually be an embodied community together so that we can help each other. Both of these ladies are also not white, and so getting to be very familiar with me and my white body that I can put in front of them in bad situations is something that is important to me. There might be some other things we're doing. I mean, we're participating in food drives and jacket drives and sort of all the community aid things. And we actually want to start, like, we're going to put together a happy hour, but we want to start a either weekly or bi-weekly neighborhood happy hour where we can all bring things we don't want, people can take what they need, and then we can end up donating the rest. So again, getting involved locally is one of those things. We also try to spend basically as much money as we can in local businesses in the neighborhoods and on tipping service people. So these are just some ideas, what I have come up with that I can be doing right now as we are all on this march toward dictatorship. Our question of the week, so my talent manager, Lizy, who reads more of the comments than I do, says she keeps seeing people ask me about where I get my necklaces. So at least 80% of the time I made them. Every now and then it will be something I was gifted or bought, but usually I make it myself. For all of you who say you want one, the good news is you can get them in my shop. The bad news is I'm not necessarily keeping up with demand. They're called Love Bomb collars, and I don't even have one here to show. But basically, I buy a bunch of junk jewelry on eBay, usually. Sometimes I find stuff at thrift stores, etc. And then I add yarn, as one does. And I think they're really cool. Check them out. We thought we would cover that. Events coming up this Saturday is my monthly Stitch and Bitch. That is a Patreon level subscription. We get together for 90 minutes to just talk. I have the Veteran Women's Call on November 1st. I don't know why it says it's 7 to 10 EST, because it's definitely at 10 to 11:30 EST. This is for basically anyone other than straight cisgendered male veterans. We are getting together to talk about the challenges of serving in female bodies and identities. And if you are interested in joining us, you can email admin@uncultureyourself.com. It is free. It is a group for us to all support each other and the specific challenges that women veterans have. We are restarting Cult Book Club on November 12th. This is at 6:30 p.m. EST. Book Club is also a Patreon level subscription. It's $10 a month. We do 2 book clubs. So on November 12th, the second Wednesday of the month at 6:30 EST, we get together and we discuss like a memoir or a fiction book. We're starting with The Other Boleyn Girl. And then the next week, the third week of every month, we get together at the same time and we discuss a cult theory book. I can't remember which one this is, but we sent out the book club list. So if you are on book club already, go check out your calendar invite. It now has a new list, and you should also have a book or an email. We are putting together a list of all the books from last year and all the books from this year, and that is going to be available at knittingquiltlady.com if you are someone that just wants the recommended list of books that we are reading. Podcasts. I have not one, but 2 podcasts. So this week, Cults and the Culting of America podcast featured Rebecca and Pete Davis, the sister-brother duo behind the movie Join or Die, which I have told you about, a film about why you should join a club and why the fate of America depends on it. This was such an interesting and important conversation where they highlighted the importance of authentic in-person community and why the interactions we have in our clubs, in our neighborhoods, in our local civic organizations is actually super, super, super important to the health of our democracy. So please check that out. Obviously, my co-host Scott Lloyd and I usually focus on the problematic aspects of groups in our podcast, but in this episode, we talked about what I like to call social health or social hygiene. Not the same social hygiene that people were worried about in the late 19th century, which was ostensibly about curbing the spread of STIs, but also had some weird eugenics elements. Social hygiene we are talking about is a healthy balance in community participation, being intersectional, intentional, and proactive about engagement in local activities and community organizations is healthy for both the community and yourself. Because involvement in multiple organizations, caring about multiple issues, inherently protects you from being exploited by one single person or organization. This was a very interesting conversation, and it's part of what motivated me to plan an in-person knit-in, to start my ladies' dance group, etc. Also motivated me to start a dance club with a couple of my friends who share my interest in salsa dancing. And actually, so one of us is a Korean ex-evangelical, and she has been deconstructing again and taking K-pop dance lessons. So she's going to teach us some K-pop. The other one is a Japanese American woman who comes from uber Catholic homeschooling crazy life. And she is interested in swing dancing, but because we're all like almost in our 40s or in our 40s, one of us is 50. We're not going out at 10 p.m. to go dancing. So we're just going to do it on our own. And once in a while, we might actually go dancing. So she's going to be teaching us some swing dancing, and you too. We're just going to teach ourselves. I am quite an accomplished salsa, merengue, and bachata dancer. So that is what I will be contributing. And of course, I totally expect that like a year from now, we're going to be doing some grown lady dance performances. So, stay tuned. The previous episode of Cults and the Culting of America, Scott and I discussed Pete Hegseth's Mojo Dojo Casa Military and his big scary Department of War meeting. We then talked about Scott's new book, The God I Was Given, Finding Faith After Losing My Religion, and how his journey with deconstructing coercive religion included keeping his faith. And we will also be doing that book for book club. The last 2 weeks of Hey White Women were each fiery in their own way. We didn't do a SitRep last week. That's what I'm talking about too. Last week, I started my public deconstruction of Swiftianity, which has been a long time coming, and Rebecca was ready to hash it out with me as always. I talk a lot about hot topics and controversial issues on my channel, but weirdly, my new takes on Taylor Swift have been especially controversial. I guess not that weirdly. Maybe I'm not the only one who needs to look in the showgirl mirror. On this week's episode, we went back to not Rapture Day and talked about how cultural events such as the witch trials ingrained in white women that standing out for any reason is unsafe, and thus the anti-identity of whiteness was etched into our DNA as American white women. As it turns out, standing out is more fun and brings me so much joy and community on a daily basis. P.S. The witch trials make an appearance in my new book, The Culting of America. Book club, as an email as well as Patreon post has been sent out earlier. We talked about that already. Our GoFundMe, we are about to hit $6,000. Our goal was $7,000. So thank you so much. The GoFundMe has covered the creation of the audiobook, which was recorded by me, by Lizy Freudmann, who contributed an essay, and by Rebecca Slew, White Women Whisperer, who also contributed an essay. I'm so excited to share it with all of you. Thanks so much for those of you who have been involved. I have an amazing team of people who help me put content together every week. Meghan Picmann is my admin. She's also responsible for most of the best one-liners. She didn't know anything about cults when she started working for me, but now she knows enough to be credited as a weekly producer on my Situation Report and on some podcasts. Haley Phillips is my podcast producer. Lizy Freudmann is my talent manager and supervising producer of the SitRep. She's basically my boss, but I pay her. She is not as funny as Meghan. She's trying, but she's not quite there yet. She wrote this, by the way. If there's a particularly thorny topic that requires a lot of research, she's usually the ones writing the notes. Lizy is also the last eyes on the SitRep doc before it goes to me, and she does her best to check and double check everyone's research and contributions. Lizy has 2 master's degrees and also has 2 papers published in academic journals. So she's a good researcher, but laments the struggles of keeping these notes as accurate and up to date as possible when we often discuss topics that are rapidly evolving and changing. They do so much work to put this together for me. Next week, I'm going to try to remember. I saw Amanda Smile Takes did A Day in the Life of a Political Content Creator, and that was super fun and interesting for me to watch. So I'm going to try to do probably next Monday, if I remember, A Day in the Life of a Cult Content Creator, and show you all the things that we do, because it's definitely not just me by myself posting videos and takes on the internet. People tend to think that content creation is an easy job, and it's a nice job. I get to do it from my house wearing whatever I want, but it's definitely a job, and we work quite a lot, and we are so happy for the growth of our platform and getting to know all of you. Thanks for being here. We have a song of the week. We've been having some fun meetings with musicians that are aligned with the Knitting Cult Lady brand to talk about doing the musical. I now have someone who's going to mentor me through the musical, hopefully help me record Have a Day pretty soon. This week's song of the week is by one of the artists we've met with recently, and their band is called My New Mixtape. We are big fans of his song, Who's Your Daddy?, which is about Trump, which we feel a lot of you will relate to as you wonder what the fuck Trump voters were thinking. We gotta laugh so we don't cry, and we gotta keep making art so we have somewhere to put our emotions. And, you know, I was watching a creator who talks about fascism and how her family came from Italian supporters of fascism. And she talked about how part of the march to fascism is always denigrating the arts and prioritizing math and science above the arts, which is one of the things, of course, that America has done recently. And one of the things that people always say is, like, you must create art in times of tyranny. I also highly recommend doing some form of art if you are a trauma survivor of any kind, because healing can be really, really tied to making art, and we know that hobbies are tied to happiness. So now, for some nitpicking, you can enjoy some of the things that I have made. All right. So this week, I just got obsessed with making what I'm calling cult cuffs. And I've been doing these for a while, but I've just been doing them as my own kid grows out of something. And then I realized I could just go to a thrift store and buy kids' clothes. So I made these gold sequin ones. I've made these pink ones. Some of these are in my shop if anyone wants to check them out. I made, these I already had, these green vintage gloves, but I put some fuzz on them. Oh, these ones are super pretty and sparkly. And some maroons. And then I also realized that when I cut off the arms of, like, a top of a child, I can, with a little bit of opening up the underarms, pretty much make it fittable for me. So now I have these cute new outfits, and it's gonna be my whole personality. Okay. I also had this sweater, which I found boring and never wore. And so I cut off the sleeves and added some fuzz, and now it's absolutely adorable. With those sleeves, I made these really cool cuffs. This is a special yarn that my Brazilian host daughter gave me. So I love those tremendously. Here's one of the shirts that I fixed up. Already sold the cuffs from that, but cute little white crop top. Children's clothes are so much more whimsical, so I love it. And maybe you've been watching me knit this one for a little while. Another, because I have 3 now, peacock scarf again. Or I take a scarf, turn it into a cardigan. And this one, you can even tie. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. Don't let the bad guys get you down. We, the people, are the ones that are going to have to figure out how to resist. I remind you, nobody's coming for us. Not the military, not another country, not Katniss Everdeen. We are going to have to figure out what is going to happen on our first march toward American dictatorship. Have a day, everybody. Stickers attached.